YouTube. So as my new motto for 2020, I guess is better late than never, because it's the middle of December, but I'm just now getting around to wrapping up November. I read a total of 21 books, and 3 of them were fiction that were like rolled over from October, and all the rest were nonfiction. I'm just going to be talking about like my top 5 favorites, which I normally do for my end of the month wrap up, but I know it's a bit weird this past month because I didn't do any other wrap ups, I don't believe. And so I'm gonna do better this in December and for the future, like of doing like my normal like weekly or bi-weekly videos to and capture everything I read, because I just don't want to sit here and like talk through all 21, because like I'll often forget things, and it's just hard for you as well, I'm sure. Just like sit there and watch them all. So I'm just going to focus on my favorites. So the first one is the second book in the James Thoreau, I guess I pronounce his name, All Creatures Great and Small series. And this one is All Things Bright and Beautiful. And this is focusing on his time from when he was married and going forward there. And he is he works as a vet in a small area in Yorkshire in England, and it's not in recent time. I think it's like during the Great Depression, and so, or even earlier. Well, I can't remember exactly. Around that time. But yes, and so it's interesting because he's writing this later in life, and so he talks about how when he goes to visit different animals to help them, how if only this was nowadays when we have this medication to use, but he's using at that time, using mortar and pestle, grounding up the medications to give to them, which was very interesting. And there's a lot of humor in this book, along with there's tragedy and there's excitement, with the different animals, what they're going through, and the different characters of the town, which is nice to read about. But the humor involved is basically his coworkers. I can't remember their names, but the older man, because he joined as an apprentice, and so the older man is the owner. He underneath him is James and his younger brother, and so he constantly gets himself worked up and aggravated over something, and he blames it on James or the younger brother. For example, stop misplacing these tools, or stop using too much of such and such material. But then at the end of those little clips of the story, because each chapter in this book is like a mini incident, a mini story in and of itself. And at the end of one of them, it would be he himself, when James went to go doctor one of the animals after the owner had, he found all this the string or whatever he was using, whatever material had been that the owner had been complaining about before. So I'm not exactly explaining it right, but they do have quite a bit of humor in them. So yeah, I'm really enjoying these series. Probably when I read books 3 and 4, I think there's only 4 total in the series. They're probably all going to make my my top 5 favorites of the month. And then I went on to read Beverly Cleary's another memoir, A Girl from Yam Hill. And this is focusing on her time until she graduated from college. And she started at a farm in Yam Hill. And then she moved to Portland, which is kind of cool because that's where I'm currently located. And I've started reading the Ramona Quimby books. I think it was in 2020 when I started reading them. And so when Nonfiction November came around, I was like, okay, I want to read more about her herself, Beverly Cleary herself. And just through her writing of her memoir, you can really, and her childhood especially, you can really see the seeds in place of Beverly herself seems to really embody Ramona. And so I feel like Beverly took a lot from her own life and the friends that she had, and for example, making taking the cans and putting string, and so using them as stilts, walking around clomping all over the sidewalk on those, and making a bunch of clanking noises, and all sorts of things like that. And but it also dealt with some heartache, similar to her Ramona Quimby books, how the father in those books lost his job and was really struggling with depression and self-confidence issues and just trying to find a job. Well, the same thing happened in her own life. Her father lost his job during the Great Depression and was really struggling for work, and then he ended up working at a dank cellar place, guarding this bank cell, and so that was a bit sad to read about. And then the mother is a little bit different for sure than her fiction books, because the mother, at least the way Beverly portrays her, she's very nitpicky and self-controlling, and really wants to meddle a lot in Beverly's life. And so when she gets to be a teenager, she goes on a date with an older gentleman. I think he's like 24 or 25, and she's like 15 or 16, somewhere around there. So there's quite a bit of an age gap there. And the mother really pushes her to marry him. Because again, it's like, decades and decades ago, where it was more acceptable, to get married right out of college. I'm right out of high school. But Beverly does not want that. She wants to, she just wants to settle down right away. She wants to, go to college and have a career. And so yeah, it's all this struggle, especially with money, was a huge part of this. I don't want to describe this whole book as like being a whole downer of a book. It wasn't, but she was going through struggles. And I think her Ramona Quimby books just show like that Beverly, I think, really was constantly looking at the positives in life, which is what I always try to do as well. And so, through your struggles with your family, or the situation that you're given, or finances, how, there's always, light at the end of the tunnel, or, things aren't always going to stay the same. It will get better, better or worse. Something's going to change, so nothing's going to stay the same. And then I will go to the one physical book that was one of my favorites. This is The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt by Edmund Morris. And funny enough, I got like halfway through, maybe less than halfway through, and I was like, I want to read the ebook. So I went and bought all three in the trilogy of the Theodore Roosevelt biography by Edmund Morris, because I was really liking it. But yeah, the tiny font, and just like, I don't know, it's so much easier to read on an ebook. So if it had it available, okay, I'm gonna go for it. And this is following his life from birth all the way until he became a president. But it didn't focus on his presidency at all. It was like the epilogue was basically, William McKinley getting shot, and then Roosevelt finds out that he is going to be president. And so, but yeah, this was very, very well written. It won the Winter Pulitzer Prize, so yeah, you would expect it to be well written. And yeah, he lived a very interesting life, and he was for sure like a man of his times. In particular, like talking about his stance on some political things, but him going out to the Dakotas and racking up piles and piles of animals that he has shot just for fun. Like at the beginning of his, not the beginning of his life, but at the beginning of his time with a rifle, with a gun, he talks about how he's doing like science studies and on these creatures, and like logging that down. But then later on, like I guess he gets to like teenage and like college, like the 20s, his 20s, like he really like starts being more of the trophy hunter, I think. But yes, if you don't know anything about Theodore Roosevelt, or you're interested in it, I would highly recommend these books. They're really, really good. And there's some pictures throughout, like, let's see if I can find them. So each chapter had at least one picture. So speaking of his hunting, this is from 1884, when he's dressed up in his hunting costume in the Dakotas. Let's see if I can find at least one more to show you. Let's see. There's a picture of his wife in here as well. He goes, his first marriage, he was like completely smitten with this woman, and she was really pretty. Here she is, Alice Hathaway Lee. When it says when Theodore Roosevelt first met her, and she died really young, and after she had Alice Roosevelt, and so he was just completely distraught over this, and but yeah, it shows like the love letters he had before then. So when he got married the second time, because this also talks about the second marriage, his relationship with her was like completely different, and he didn't show that like that youthful exuberance that he had with the first marriage. So it was interesting to see how him growing up and maturing. And so yeah, and also it follows his time as being in the police in New York, and so yeah, I'm gonna be reading the second book. I think it's Colonel Roosevelt is the second book in January. And then going on to my next favorite is Early An Intimate History of Premature Birth and What It Teaches Us About Being Human by Sarah de Gregorio. Let's see if I can turn it down a bit since it's a white cover. And so this, I was very interested in when I heard about it. I think it came out this year. And it's because it pertains to myself. I was born 3.5 months early. So I was very, very premature. I was born at 1.5 pounds. And so the author herself, she had a child that was born premature. And so then she looked for other people's stories and the parents as well as the children, and how, using like modern day medicine, how that has improved some things. But she makes a huge point of the fact that no matter how much medical advances we have, nothing can compare to the mother herself bringing the baby to full term in the womb. And she talks a lot about how the baby is laying down in like the incubator, and it can't really turn as much compared to the womb, where it can just like float around, and it's like and so there's all these different studies or like different machinery advances that are trying to be made to make the baby more comfortable. And because you think about it, like all these bright lights and the tubes and the needles, and they're all hooked up to everything, and the beeping noise, and compared to like the quiet womb. And so yeah, it was really interesting. And I have never read a book about specifically about premature babies, and what's the causes of this, and what's the lifespan of them, and their health outlook. But I just knew about my own story. Like I was lucky to I was lucky to live, for one thing. I know my grandparents were constantly, every time my birthday came around, which is funny enough, it's coming up this week. But anyway, my grandparents would always say, you're so lucky to be alive, because the doctors were saying that I had a 10% chance of living. And so I'm lucky to be here, and I'm reading books, and I'm reading about this experience. And because I was born during the 80s, and so this is talking about, this is written, I think it was 2020. So yeah, it's quite a bit, 30 years later, in the technology that we have now. And it also spoke a lot of, not a lot, but it focused on, the reasons for having a premature birth. And my mother never told me why. I don't know. I have no idea why I was, born so early. But some of the reasons could be like stress. And I was talking about how, or like your body, like the mother's body wants to reject. It's like it's interfering with. It thinks like the baby is like a virus that it wants to fight, so that could be something. But it talks quite a bit about how in the African American community it has a high risk of premature birth, and all the ins and outs of why that is, due to like poverty or social situations or stress. And so that was very interesting. She went down or interviewed people in Louisiana. That was like one of the like more harder hit areas for premature birth. And so yeah, anyway, this was very interesting. If you're interested in this subject, then yeah, I would highly recommend this book. But I don't really have a frame of reference outside of my own personal experience, because I haven't sought out books I like this. So yeah, and then my last favorite book of the month is The Magnetic North, Notes from the Arctic Circle by Sarah Wheeler. And she wrote Terra Incognita. That's the other book I wanted to read, because that's her experience going to Antarctica. And this is when she's going to the Arctic Circle. And I think it's like over 2 years. I'm trying to make it a little bit better so you can see it. Okay. Yeah, okay, there you go. And so this is her experience going to the Arctic Circle, and it took her 2 years. She's explored all the different areas, an Arctic Circle that's owned by different countries. She started off in Russia, and then she went to Alaska and the different areas all around the Arctic Circle. And it's interesting to see, which is what I wanted to read about, like how people not just different cultures live in that area, but how the country that they're from interferes or meddles with, I don't know how to explain it, with the environment of the area. So when I was going to Alaska, she focused on the pipeline and the highway that was specifically built to follow this pipeline from the Arctic Circle down to Fairbanks, and and like the different people that, you know, the studies that they're she was living with the scientists who were doing studies, but then she was also focusing on the oil drilling, and you know how that has interfered in like the pipeline, that, you know, some of the people when she was up there visiting with were much a fan of the pipeline, and then there's other people who were, you know, talking about all the negatives of this pipeline. And then she went to Russia, and just the poverty that they were dealing with. I can't remember the name of the town. I should take notes on these things, I swear, so I can have a better grasp. Not a better grasp. I don't remember it, but I just like to explain it and remember all the names. But it's a really, really poor town, and these people were just like, kind of like scraping by. But the hotels where she was like looking into staying, and she couldn't afford them. She was ended up staying with like friends of friends kind of situation, because the hotels were like, one night there at a hotel was like the same as like more than a month's income of a person living in the town. So that was very interesting. And then this other country she was going to visit, the people were heavily overweight, because they had really gotten out of their like their cultural way of eating, and were eating lots of like Americanized, like fast food, junk food kind of thing, and how that was affecting their health, and they were having a hard time going back to their old way of life, and you know, eating like the, you know, the local berries and the meat in that area. So yeah, it was really interesting to read about, and I for sure want to read more of Sarah Wheeler's work. So yeah, those are all my favorites for the month of November. Let me know if you've read any of these books, or if what your favorites were from the if you read any nonfiction books, or fiction books as well. Like, what were your favorite books in November? So yes, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, BookTube.